go to not forfeiting. If it should go to whether it's a felony or a fine, it should go to a fine. That's what I'm saying. That's what this is intended for. It's not a stretch to do that. We didn't have the courage or the fucking leadership at the time to even meet halfway on that. Instead, they flipped it around and used it as a sword to go after people. But if we're going to talk about what the law says, and we got some federalist, lunatic, antagonistic judge, and they're honoring their interpretation or their theory of interpreting law, they should have a tough time getting around this. That this act does not limit, that's an important aspect, does not limit any privileges, rights, immunities, or defenses of a person as provided in the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. Okay, so what this means is, if you're acting and assuming protections under this act, this language says that any of your privileges as a medical marijuana patient will not be interfered with. So the argument, so it doesn't give you any greater protections as a Michigan medical marijuana patient. You're still going to be subject to all those same scrutinies as a Michigan medical marijuana patient. And this doesn't cure the problem, really, of arresting patients and caregivers and, wet marijuana and curing dry, like all that shit still exists, right? There's still problems with the MMA. But those problems, if they get fixed, they don't get fixed, exist independent of your protections as a legal adult, and that law should protect you independent of your medical. Now, if you're outside of your limitation of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, I think this says that it doesn't speak to it. But I think, an interpretation could be that, it defaults back to the public health code violations, or maybe there's some kind of, like an equation they could say, like, well, this statute allows you to have this, and a certain amount of that after that's a civil infraction, but you got this much, so we're going to use this, and that's felony. I don't know. I mean, but the point is, do they really want to do this? You know what I mean? But Jamie, your point, listen, your response. They
will do stuff like that in some courts, and for sure.
But I mean, listen, the thing is, it's it's interesting because there are limitations here. It wasn't a free for all. It wasn't like, but in reality, people, the penalties are minimized to a certain degree. There's still felonies that could happen, obviously. But, if it is accepted as what the people want, the communities that voted for it, from the people's, from the citizens' perspective, push on the local communities, at the end of the day, like it should not be a problem. I mean, the only way it's a problem is if you have a leadership that's focused on eradicating
wants to make an issue
right.
out of it.
Or, really what it is you need a leadership that's going to placate the unknown, to lead by training, to give honest, reasonable responses and get them out to those that will be enforcing it. That's what Schuette didn't do, right? The idea that in 2017 I could still ask a drug detective, have you ever read the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act? And they will say, the whole thing? Yeah, the whole thing.
Now, Dana included in the discussion, I'm sure you've heard it before too, she wants to create a plan to get necessary information to the people who need it, such as law enforcement, about how these things are to be
right
interpreted. And again, in her position, she can really set the tone in a lot of
And if you rewind from the very beginning, I'm talking all the way through 403 episodes, this one being Bill Schuette off today, and the 150 before that, while it may have sounded at times I was ripping on police officers in a negative way, it really wasn't. It was a cry for help for them because they've been misled. They've been trained falsely. They have been led, and they know it, and it's time for that to give them some relief, and I don't blame them. They were trained, false lies, and...
But can they be untrained?
Sure they can.
They can be led.
Don't you think it's ingrained in some of these people's
lives? We live in a state of the police, or a police state. Mm-hmm. The leading police leader, the leading law enforcement agent of our police state is the Attorney General.
Cop in
She's the chief.
That's right.
Right. She's the chief. And in that regard, she needs, she can set policy and tones and educate and train them and focus them. And listen, it's not an easy task,
Fire the MSP leadership.
Hey, here's the one thing I'll tell you. I was involved in a traffic situation where, illegal transport was talked about, and they said, in this county we have to deal with that, but in the next county we don't. Police officers are very agile in being able to juggle different rules for different places. Under the MMMA, they could stand in one corner and have a local ordinance that allows dispensaries, and on the other side of the street they don't. These people can handle it.
That story sounded eerily familiar.
I knew it would.
I've
to
seen
you.
that video. It's not pretty. Listen,
Furtive motions.
But Jim, I don't know if you can share your off-camera secrets that you were telling me. I'm going to. Everyone cover their ears. No. Jim was talking about, he overheard some law enforcement folks talking about the effects of it. They're higher trained group of people.
They accept the change.
But that's a trained.
So the men and women are fine. Just a few decision makers are kind of the
trained.
assholes in all this.
We're talking about the law enforcement and recognizing what the change in law means and how it really means. And he was talking about like a federal, quasi-federal agent that was, kind of thing where there was a persecution of it. But, state agents, they may be plotting and planning right now. How do we get around it? Smell's got to still be probable cause.
Well, they're worried about the revenue, I'm sure, and what they're used to doing for years is going to change now. So that's.
Is it fair if we start laying down some bets right now in terms of how long it's going to be till things, get implemented? Can we set some time
licensing, commercial licensing?
No, let's have like a. People get like a death list, like, who's going to die, what I'm saying? Like in the Howard Stern stuff. Let's get like, stats like how long is it going to be till MSP Crime Lab no longer is testing 40% of their budget to testing marijuana. How long till the court systems reduce? How long till drug testing facilities, which are testing for marijuana all the time, go out of business? How soon do they start eliminating district court judges?
I think that's the next fight, right? Because
in Kent County, it's already started.
Yeah,
how long until a vigilante group forms to take out the more rotten prosecutors and police involved?
Don't say that.
No, but
that was a fantasy story.
Our next fight is going to be
friend.
the driving and marijuana fight, and that one is going to be a real pain in the ass.
Well, they tried the children fight. It didn't work.
The children fight didn't really work for them.
A lot of people are not buying the traffic thing either. A lot of mainstream knows that that's a bunch of bullshit. I mean, there's work to be done there. But
we just need to educate.
On our other radio program, Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Margot Bruner had said that their next meeting, I believe, of the driving commission, the final report will be due out in 2019, and I believe the end of the first quarter, March, kind of April, May type of a thing, and that will really be definitive. Although they're going to try and jack with us in lame duck this year, they're going to try and do it in the next 30 days.
And she was talking about the nanograms and stuff like that. So that sounds
wrong.
like that's going to be a
They're
reality.
try to
but she was
define-
talking about it like it was okay.
It's coming.
So
They're going to try to
I'm
define
sure.
what is impaired.
The train
Yeah.
is
The
going down the tracks.
she said they were going to try, and I could feel that.
But I said, well, my concern was,
Did you listen to the show?
Did somebody just assume or accept the premise that driving while using cannabis is necessarily a
She
bad
talked
thing?
like it was.
And then now
She
we go to
spoke like it
prove
was.
at what point, do you figure out when somebody's being bad? I think, that whole type of an
It's a
approach
foregone
could be
conclusion.
off.
The premise of that commission was designed in order to create a nanogram driving standard. It wasn't to explore whether or not a nanogram driving standard
the
was
science
applicable
of it.
or scientific.
Yeah.
It said you must come up with a number because
and
that's what
she
we, the
indicated.
cops,
Yeah,
want.
That's what she.
That's
how
an
she was
issue,
speaking,
right?
yeah.
It shows
Michael,
it's ridiculous.
Is that an issue?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me say this. The most comprehensive report ever done by any studied standards, federal government, Schaefer report says there is no link of bad driving.
Right.
Right.
Cannabis. That's number one.
And that's not the only report.
But I know that. But listen, I'm saying, and then you got Marilyn Hoistis that was not able to put a number up 10 to 20. The federal paid maybe 10 to 20 nanograms. And still, she couldn't put a scientific conclusion on what that number was.
And AAA
report
no
said
basis.
no basis whatsoever. They should put their money into drug recognition experts. Now, I prefer that, even though I think it's junk science. From a legal standpoint, I'd rather
It's
try to undo
Science should be more
Well,
legal.
listen,
If
you
you're
don't
not
listen,
observably
you don't
impaired,
let me
you're
say
not
this.
really
You do
impaired.
not understand. You guys do not understand the way it works.
Oh, we
Whether
understand.
or not .08, .05, .10 is drunk or not doesn't matter, because the the way in which it will be fed into our folklore and accepted as a violation of the law, whether it's true or not, will happen the same way marijuana was sold as being a Schedule 1, and it already has. Do you see what I'm saying? The idea that they're going to come up with some kind of scheduled number on some report and people believing it, whether it's true or not. Do you know what I mean?
Doesn't matter if people believe it. If the cops enforce it, that's...
But my point is, I would rather have a chance to go at the police officer and undo his so-called scientific conclusions versus some
a number
that has been
nothing.
That means nothing, but has been beat into the legal limit of our folklore. That somehow means something, and they've made it akin to the, alcohol level. That to me is the much harder road to hoe. We talked about this. See, in alcohol-related driving cases, even though it's operating while intoxicated as the OWI, within that tutelage, you've got two choices of the jury to convict. One is based on bad driving caused by the consumption of alcohol, okay? The other one is the breath alcohol level being greater than the legal limit. And the jury will be read an instruction that they must presume it to be accurate. So even if you show that the person was not acting drunk, there's no evidence. You undo the field sobriety tests that are really, most of them not even standardized. They did pass some, not all the, points of failing. It doesn't matter if you undo them because they still have the choice of, the breath alcohol level is this. And maybe it was but we know that that's, and then they don't know what the number means. They don't know that, what has the relation to a number. Piece of paper says blah, blah. How do you get there? They don't know. They just know that number means drunk. That's my concern. That folklore being beaten into our culture, click it, ticket, click it, seatbelt, whatever, the other shit they come up with, they start pounding that into, it's not just the warning people, it's the jurors in the community of what's illegal, right? You get them on the community, then they hear, you got to blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter if I'm arguing that they weren't impaired, they weren't driving fine. It doesn't matter. The law says this number means you're guilty. That's been the disaster in the drunk driving defense. You have to undo the breathalyzer operator's skill. And that is harder to do, I would argue, than undoing their stupid shit on this drug recognition stuff. That's more foreign and harder to understand and be proving than one number that they're able to just spew out there.
Exactly.
So that's my thought on it.
Yeah, science, it doesn't get involved at that point then.
Listen, even drug recognition experts, it's not science, it's junk science.
I understand.
But I would rather, if I had to pick neither's the choice. There is no...
No, the fact that the law should be applying science, and if there's no science that works for determining anything, then the police do their job, and the standard is somebody's driving badly, and that's how they get started with with their investigation.
Evidence-based driving, not
evidence-based observations, not chemical-based observations.
And that's been
because chemical-based observations are only a snapshot of your behavior.
Right, and that's been the standard since People v. Kuhn. The world has not ended. Marijuana-impaired fatalities in the state of Michigan have not gone up.
Listen,
our concern is that they start looking, right, and we've talked about this before, Michael, that with being unable to continue as before with the probable cause and the changes in this law, you might start focusing on other things for revenue generation, looking at people driving.
Maybe they can have a bake sale. That'd be fun. That'd be good.
Confiscated stuff that's been in storage for a while.
Yeah, there you go.
Listen, I want to make this point. Butter. This commission to find a per se, in my position, my view, is intellectually incapable of doing anything accurate. The idea that they think they need to go find this number when zero tolerance is the law, you can't have both. You can't go look for a number and say zero tolerance is dangerous. What kind of lie is that?
Well, zero tolerance is going to go away.
Okay, but as it exists right now and they need a commission to come up with a number?
They need a commission to come up with a number for medical marijuana, not for rec.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if that's true.
I think some of the lawmakers might be planning on some weird shit.
No. Let me be.
They couldn't do that for the Supreme Court.
Let me be clear. That's not how it's going to work out. But that committee was commissioned specifically to set a nanogram limit for medical marijuana. If you thought for 1 second that rec was not going to come and that they were somehow going to get rid of zero tolerance, they would never, ever do that. Why would they do that?
Well, I'll tell you this. That commission was set up and put in motion at a time when they were aware that we were going to be running a legalization campaign